Hi, I'm Ellen Gunning. I'm the Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations and a member of the Central Council of EADL, the European Association for Distance Learning. The purpose of this video series is to introduce you to our members. And today I'm delighted to be speaking with Dr. Leah Matthews. She's the Executive Director and CEO of the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, that's a mouthful, DEAC, in Washington, D.C. Leah, delighted to have you with me.
Yeah, delighted to be here. I've really enjoyed my experience with the EADL, and I look forward to talking with you about them, Ellen.
Well, start by telling me about DEAC, if you would, because it's, am I right in thinking it's 97 years old? You were formed in 1926.
Yes, we are in our 97th year. Our main focus has been the accreditation and quality assurance of distance education institutions, primarily that operate in the United States. But we've been growing, Ellen, into a more international marketplace with needs for accreditation and distance ed. And that's been really exciting work. At DEAC, we currently have about 100 institutions accredited that are located in the United States, and we enroll about 1.2 million students. Our work spans all types of program offerings, from certificates and diplomas all the way to the doctoral level degree. Most of our students are working professionals who are looking for credentials to either advance themselves professionally or just develop in their field. So this vibrant community of teaching and learning just continues to serve students and serve higher education by offering quality assurance platforms to look through the lens of distance education and look at how students are achieving using distance education to meet their educational and professional goals.
Over 1 million students is a huge number of students. When DEAC was first formed, I presume that was correspondence courses and a very small number of students.
Oh,
I'm wondering, what was the impetus to actually create the organization in the first place?
It was created around a correspondence course model. And it was around a time in the United States when accreditation was emerging for all sorts of higher education entities and institutions. So DEAC's accreditation, which was founded as the National Home Study Council, its original name, was formed right along other accrediting activities in the United States, whether it's the Higher Learning Commission that formed around the University of Chicago, the New England Commission for Higher Education, again, that formed around Harvard. Each kind of sector and region in the United States was creating an accrediting body to look at quality assurance. It was driven further through the military funding through our GI Bill program and Veterans Assistance programs. And then finally in 1965, the President Johnson's Great Society Initiative made financial aid available to anyone who wanted to pursue higher education, just so long as the accreditor was recognized through the Department of Education. So DEAC has been a part of that process for a long time, and we have a very proud record of being sort of the pioneer in distance ed quality assurance in the United States.
And are you federal or state? Pardon my ignorance.
In the United States, organizations like ours are private nonprofit organizations. Accreditation is not a government function. However, our government, through the Department of Education, has a process it calls recognition of accreditors. So we are reviewed through a panel that advises our Secretary of Education on accreditor status. And when you have a recognition status, your institutions can access financial aid for students.
And can you then accredit courses only within the Washington, D.C. state, within the D.C. state, or can you accredit courses throughout the country?
Anywhere in the U.S., anywhere worldwide. Our accreditation process is available to any distance ed institution that has an interest in working with us. And we have the criteria on our website for learning more about that process at deac.org. And we welcome partners to join us in this process of quality review and distance ed.
So you quality reviewed the organization so that I'm confident as a distance student that I'm going to a reputable organization. Am I right in thinking that all of the colleges, the courses in the colleges that you accredit are university courses, so the third level education, or do you also deal with private institutions?
We deal with all levels of institutions, private, public, higher education, doctoral degree granting, and also in the K-12 system. So any educational offering that's in the distance education sector can apply to the EAC for accreditation. Now, other accreditors in the United States also have distance education in their scope. So we don't accredit everything, but we accredit a good part of it. And we have been involved in it for the longest period of time than any other accreditor in the United States.
And tell me, what kind of a trend are you seeing now? Over the years, you must have seen huge changes in distance education. What have you
Sure.
seen, and what are you seeing for the future?
You know, in the early 2000s, distance education really started to take off because technology advances made it easier to host content on learning platforms, to use technology-enhanced systems to promote teaching and learning, to track student achievement, and to deliver content. But I would say, Ellen, boy, the pandemic has made distance education mainstream. Every institution in the US now has some form of distance education as part of its curriculum and its offerings to students. All institutions are operating learning management systems. We're all using technology-enhanced systems to deliver on what students expect to see in a highly technical learning environment. And boy, the artificial intelligence and adaptive chat GPT, these things that we talked at the last conference with EADL quite a bit, is also really bursting on the scene as an innovation to learn how to deal with effectively and appropriately, whether you're teaching or learning as a student.
It's a huge challenge because used properly, it has to be a great resource. Used improperly, it's got to be a nightmare for both the learners and the educators. If the trend is towards, and I get what you're saying about COVID, that changed everything and made distance learning a part of every form of learning. For the distance learning courses, or the students who are taking distance learning, their demands would have changed because they're much more familiar, I would suggest, with social media than the teachers of distance learning were. So they're putting more pressure on. Are they changing? Is their profile changing? Are they becoming younger post-COVID? Were they traditionally older? What's the profile?
Well, the distance learning student today has come up through a culture of education technology. And so, you know, because the students that are looking into higher education today are more comfortable than ever with remote learning, with using electronic devices, with kind of going between a laptop, an iPhone, all sorts of different portals. And they're so comfortable with this system, they're expecting it. And they're fully expecting an education technology-based experience when they go to college that either enhances and supports an on-campus learning experience or enables them to have access remotely so they can work, travel, do other things. So it's really interesting to see how the student profile has evolved to be more accepting of education technology and in fact, demanding some of these sophistications in their learning experiences.
And what's your experience of the tutors on the other side? Because traditionally in university, tutors haven't been great big users of technology, and they've been quite resistant to change.
We've seen a big groundswell of professional development and training programs for faculty to become more familiar with these technologies. And a field that's growing in the United States and probably everywhere else is the instructional designer field, where you earn your credentials in the field of technology enhanced instruction. And you're brought on by a university to support faculty in developing their curriculum content in ways that are more technology enhanced. That deploy adaptive learning models, that provide assessment tools to students at the ready, and then also gathers data about that teaching and learning. So we can really pinpoint more than ever where our curriculum may need adjustments, where students may be falling behind or having difficulty academically. We can see that in the data that we're gathering about student learning in our learning management system. So it's a fascinating place to be. And if you're open-minded you can really, really change the outcomes in positive ways for students.
Well, you mentioned data, and data really has become the new gold everywhere, including in education.
Yeah.
In terms of data, what are you seeing? Are you seeing more men than women being comfortable with distance learning? Are you seeing more young people than older people? What's the data showing you at the moment?
Well, we're seeing very wide acceptance of education technology across all sectors of learning, across all generations. And the data is telling us more than just the descriptive. It's telling us more about how much time students are spending in a learning management system, what types of activities they're engaging in, where they may be struggling academically, where they be making progress very quickly. So we can really pinpoint how to drive institutional effectiveness by looking at the data rendered through the learning management system. And so more than just kind of demographics and enrollment patterns, we can really look deeply into how students are interacting with content.
And I presume that will affect retention of students then, because if you
Mhm.
know where students are struggling, or you know early on in the process that they're
Mhm.
having difficulty, and you
Mhm.
can bring them that bit closer and make it easier for them, you should retain them more.
Oh, absolutely. And you can deploy services more effectively and use your resources in a more conscious way. Instead of just throwing resources at things because you're just not exactly sure what's going on with your student body, what's available now in mining these data is really helping to deploy resources more effectively and in a more streamlined way. So, at DEAC, we've been pushing our institutions on institutional effectiveness data gathering. What are you learning about your students and how they're learning? And how can we improve on that process along the way?
And when you're looking at students and you're looking at them learning at a distance, you know, the way if you think about offices and the work environment, if you move away from education for a second, I was speaking to a recruiter the other day and she said it's absolutely impossible to recruit people who want to work in an office, physically to be in a place. Everybody wants to work from home, and it's now become 5 days a week rather than 3 days in and 2 days out or whatever. In terms of education, are you seeing a push by students who are saying, really, I don't need to be on campus. I don't need that much blended. Give it to me entirely as a distance course?
We are tracking that as a nation, actually. I've presented this data a couple of times at the EADL conferences. On average in the United States, there's roughly 20 million students in college programs, and we've been watching the percentage of that student body increase year over year over year in majority of distance education courses as they're making progress through a 4-year degree. And then we're seeing the number of fully on campus in-person instruction decline. And so we're just watching these trends year over year. And by doing that, again, resources are so important. Making sure that we're effectively deploying services and support structures and academic excellence and rigor around these types of methodologies in teaching and learning.
And of course, all of the technology makes it easier to keep track of what students are doing when they're not on campus anyway.
Right. It has given us tremendous benefits, but we also have to be mindful that things are evolving rapidly. Artificial intelligence is a game changer. It is an absolute game changer that is rapidly changing and doing so at such a fast pace. ChatGPT is just learning and learning and learning and getting more and more effective. It's really quite incredible to see how it's impacting higher ed in the United States right now.
In fact, trying to figure out the future for the next, it used to be, could you look down 10 or 20 years? Now it's, could you look 5 years? Because the pace is so fast. I wanted to ask you about MOOCs, these massive online learning courses that are provided absolutely free, but are educationally very valid and are very good courses. And I'm wondering how much they affect your market, if you like, in distance learning. So students pay to learn courses which are accredited, but they can take a MOOCs course with a third level college And what they're missing is that graduation certificate or that accreditation, but they've taken a really good quality course. Has that caused a decline in distance learning at all?
I would say the MOOC movement, if you will, sort of had its big moment from about 2010 to maybe 2013, where there was really some fascination around content that was put online. Andrew Ng was one of the pioneers in this area from Stanford, and he decided some of the content that he was teaching in artificial intelligence, of all things, should be made available to anybody who wanted to have access to it. And so suddenly universities were putting fairly elite instructional content online for free, and MOOCs were born. It didn't really propel enrollment in distance education as much as it just showed how distance education could feature prominently in accessibility and availability of content to anybody who wanted access to it. Assigning academic credit to a MOOC proved challenging because it wasn't being offered through the degree authorized structure that's implemented by the states in the United States. So degree granting credit is in the domain of individual states, and accreditors review that credit for quality. The Department of Education provides the financing. We call it the triad, the accreditor, state, and government triad. So MOOCs never really made it into the triad, if you will. But they did provide tremendous exemplars of how distance ed can be an effective way to learn.
And did they encourage more people to then take up learning because they've been exposed to that environment, if you like?
It built a lot of confidence in distance education systems, and it gave people a chance to just try it because many MOOCs were free. So you could, enroll in a MOOC and in any range of topics that were available and just see how distance education felt for you as a learner. So it was really quite tremendous. We have versions of MOOCs that still are around today that are course-based delivery systems. Organizations like Sophia, Straighterline, edX, to name a few, offer courses direct to consumers, and some of them can award credit that have gone through different systems for that in the United States. So it's around, Ellen. It's just sort of evolving and taking new forms and shapes.
And it's sneaking in a little bit.
I would say we can thank MOOCs for preparing us for online learning and the demands we had on us in 2020 for online learning.
That's a good complaint. And tell me something, you've mentioned quality a few times. You have a huge focus on quality. And I suppose one of the big challenges for any student who isn't on campus, who can't physically come in and see what the setup is to be sure that they're joining a quality assured association. From your point of view, what are the three top things that people get wrong? So you quality assure, and you're dealing with organizations who respect quality assurance anyway, obviously. But what are the 2 or 3 things that they mostly miss or they get wrong?
Understanding and verifying the accredited status is really important. Understanding what that accreditation will grant you as a graduate in terms of your next pathway is critical to understand. And what I mean, Ellen, is if you have aspirations for graduate study and aspirations for a particular profession like psychology or teaching or accounting, and you want a pathway to the profession, you have to be clear that the accreditation and the licensing associated with that program is in fact authentic and gets you to where you want to be professionally. Researching that is a bit tricky. There are resources through the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, CHEA.org, and also the Department of Education in the United States, ED.gov. There are databases that verify the accreditation status of an institution and its program that prepares you for a specific profession if that's what you're interested in. So if you want to be a licensed social worker, verify the accreditation, verify that in fact that program and that institution is recognized to deliver the degree that will qualify you. for that
So
profession.
make sure that you're taking either a professional course which gets you into a profession,
Mhm.
or an academically accredited course which allows you to proceed to a master's or whatever follows on from that. What's the
Exactly.
second thing that they get wrong?
Understanding the full obligations of cost and kind of effort on part of the student. It's really important to understand all of the financial obligations of the student, but also to understand the institution's policies as well. There should be very, very clear disclosure of tuition and costs and extra fees and how that all works and what are recurring costs or what you have to renew as a student to have access to resources such as an online library, online tutoring services. So just getting very clear on the costs and the learning obligations.
Cost is a very good one, because the hidden costs can be the things that would cripple a student, not the
They
upfront
do.
costs. It's
And
that those renewals on an annual basis or
oh yeah,
whatever.
and DEAC has very clear standards around that. If you are accredited with DEAC, we are very diligent about making sure that costs and disclosures are very clear to the consumers, and our institutions have to follow very rigid guidelines, but it benefits the students and it benefits the consumers to really know and understand in a clear and coherent way what the obligations are.
It's one of the things that drives me nuts looking at websites when you get to the end of this is what this course is about, and it's contact us for cost. Why? It's not going to be different from the person sitting beside me. Why can't you just, I know they say it's competitor sensitive or whatever. I've never understood it. I've always thought that if you're buying anything, you should clearly know you can afford it or you can't afford it. Before I let you go, Leah, tell me, you've been a member of EADL now for a number of years. You've spoken at our conferences each year, and we love to get that view from across the pond, from America, to see what's happening there from a European perspective. So we know the benefit that you bring to us, because you bring us that perspective. What's the benefit of EADL to DEAC? What's the benefit of the membership to you?
You know, EADL and DEAC have been sister organizations for decades. My predecessor established a relationship with EADL because we felt there was so much alignment on distance education quality and really wanting to advance a better understanding of what distance education is. I get a lot out of my participation in EADL. I feel like I get more out of it than I put into it as a speaker. I would say the lineup of colleagues and just hearing from the panel of experts that come to support this event has been tremendously beneficial to me. I really like hearing what's going on in Europe with distance education, what the challenges are, what the success stories are, how technology is being deployed in your settings with your kinds of government oversights and quality assurances in place. It has just been marvelous to have this kind of exchange. DEAC will be celebrating its 100th anniversary in 2026, and I'm really excited to see if there's a possibility for an EADL event in conjunction with our 100th here in the United States. Certainly want to bring you to our side of the pond sometime after I have been hosted and our institutions have been hosted so graciously and enjoyably at your events on the other side.
Leah, I can guarantee you, you'll get no argument from anybody on that one. Thank you so much for joining me. I thoroughly enjoyed that chat. I'm Ellen Gunning. My guest has been Dr. Leah Matthews from DEAC. And until the next edition of Meet the Members, goodbye.